By the time they implement this income tax, the way people go take cry. You know, see now they talk up. It be like they sound somehow. It be like nothing. It be like normal talk where they talk nothing concern. It be like it's fuel. Where person go talk say, waiting that they use fuel do after all I no get job or car. This one no be for poor or for rich. By the time they implement and finish, now people go tell you say I want dash you money. Say no please, I beg no put that for my account. No put that for my account. Where I want put that? I beg no put that for my account. And they call your house come collect cash. You're gonna fear to receive money. Because by the time they calculate how much will enter, come on, they can't tax you. It has nothing to do with I'm unemployed. By the time you go here. By the time the inflow and outflow, they calculate them in a year. No be person go tell you go cry back. You go to say you dey do well for the year like this. This guy dash me money, or this guy put some money for my account. And all enough now when they do our job. All of them when they do a cow. By the time they calculate, when they go tax you now, the guy tax. When I don't understand, you say they talk now. Nigerians they feel like say, may we pay tax. Country as rich as us, as Nigeria like this, we not even supposed to reason anything owing with the kind of resources where they give us. But once people just stay on their own, they chop the money. They chop our oil money. They chop them in abundance. Do you know how many mineral resources we have in Nigeria? Go to Jos, you go see so many mineral resources. Gold day for Nigeria now. Some people they mine now. Some people they mine mine our gold. They carry them, they chop them on their own alone. Our tantalite, our other mineral resources we will get for Nigeria. We know they know where they go. See our oil. Some people just get oil well. They chop the money. Then now they can't tax ordinary citizens. They want now tax ordinary citizens. Where you see say they struggle. Then go struggle, do something on their own for themselves. Government no provide their job for them. People come finish school, hustle, enter school, enter streets. Some go say our karika, some go do. Then they run around all those things, fuel their car, fuel their do their transportation, fuel or car or whatever they do. At the end of the day, you can't tax them on top of their hustle. No be saying a road, or you go tax them. You don't see people where they look for job. You don't see their shoe. You go bed like this. You go to say they deserve. One guy they feel letter like this. They feel form for where they go find job. He reach for where any deformity. He say no. Now they come next day. They walk out like that. I tell us, guy, he did before. He say no. Leave him on my shoe. She where they take the look for job. They go once do all these things finish. You can't tax them on top their suffering. On top of their sufferness, that's wickedness. So, pity Nigerians. Muna pity Nigerians. People are suffering. Pity Nigerians. This is not the time. Taxing people this kind of tax no be the first thing to do. It is not a reform.
To you.
Thank you, Shema.
Your smiles are different now.
Yeah,
compared to
I'm more relaxed now.
month ago. How do you feel?
I feel really very excited. I feel like nothing is impossible if we put our minds and hearts to it. And that despite the controversies, we can still work together as one people with one goal. And this shows possibilities can happen anywhere, including Nigeria. So I'm quite happy. And thank you for the session you moderated, the live session. Was one of the big turning points for us. At the height of the misunderstanding, controversy, people started cooking up conspiracy theories, misinformation. It was tough. I think it's right to say that was very difficult, and it could have gone either way. But we're here today, so we're happy.
We're proud of the role we played, because that's the role of the media, to help Nigeria in the most difficult period, because that divided. I've not seen in my years of practice, I've not seen a bill that has divided Nigerians more than that, ethnic-wise, religion-wise. It told so many stories. And those who did not know, because it's also something that it is a language that is understood by only the elites. So the average person sees it differently from the elites. And there are a lot of people who were hiding under the disguise of the technical language to whip up sentiment. But thank God that we're here today. But what is more important, on the 8th of August 2023, you were inaugurated, and your life changed. How significant was that for you?
Very significantly. Everything, actually, both in terms of my career trajectory, which is a decision I took intentionally, so I'm not complaining. In terms of the financial sacrifices, maybe that is even now smaller looking back. The biggest...
So you were getting lower...
No, so it's just because the amount government was going to pay was going to be ridiculous. So I said, you know what, just cover the cost of what you asked me to do. You don't need to pay me a salary. And I'm also fine with that. It's a small sacrifice in the context of the impact that this can make. But the biggest sacrifice turns out to be the emotional impact, particularly on my family. At the height of it, there were people who would cook up stories on blogs, on newspapers. There were headlines that were really very difficult to understand, and it took a toll on my family. My wife, for example, was doing night vigil every night, and then struggled to stay awake the following day. Thank God my kids are still too young, so they don't know exactly what we've been going through. But it's been tough. It's a big sacrifice. I think it's important to make the point that if Nigerians really truly want a better country, they should not discourage honest people who want to help. It's already a tough decision to try and work in the public sector. Making it harder than it needs to be is not very helpful.
So there are crucial things that matter. And one of those things that you were trying to tell Nigerians is that the new regime of these new laws, well, these 4 bills will now form the body of our new tax laws in Nigeria, that will help us to channel our resources and be able to harness our resources and make sure that revenue is targeted and well captured. What you portray to us, or what you told Nigerians, is that this will bring about transparency in the very terribly opaque system that we operate. Can you tell us in what way would this law do that?
Great question. Yeah, so you're right. The current system is opaque. And usually, if you're hiding stuff from me, I need to be suspicious of you. It's hard to trust you if you're not open and transparent. That's exactly what we have today in Nigeria. So these new laws require that government should be more transparent. There are requirements around the standard of reporting, the timeliness of those reporting, and making them accessible to the public by the agencies like the Nigeria Revenue Service. There's a role for Ministry of Finance. Of course, there's the oversight function for the National Assembly that is more properly defined. So there will be improved transparency, certainly, under this new regime. But then to the more fundamental point around what does this really mean, right? So one of the things we have been saying, because of the low level of trust, many people don't seem to believe us, is that the primary objective of this reform is not to raise more tax revenues. Because if you set out to do a reform in an economy like this with the objective of raising more revenue, you're placing the cart before the horse. Because tax revenues are the consequences of economic activities. If you don't address how to stimulate economic activities, but you want to collect more taxes, you are chasing shadows. And when you do collect taxes, taxes are a means to an end, not an end in themselves. In other words, the reason why we collect taxes is to cater for the people in terms of their well-being, their welfare, and livelihood. So therefore, your tax system, your fiscal policies, must not in any way distort economic activities, and they must not undermine the well-being of the people. With that in mind, we set out to say primary objectives will be, number one, people-centric. Can we stop taxing poverty? Can we protect small businesses? Can we allow large businesses to become larger? We want Nigerian businesses to be multinationals so that when the price of oil crashes to $40, $50, we don't panic. Imagine if you have 20, 40, 50 Nigerian multinationals earning billions of dollars from around the world and repatriating it back to Nigeria, then we'll become a more stable and prosperous economy. So we want to be people-centric in the reforms. Number two, we want to be efficiency-driven. So are there areas where we are inefficient, maybe how we collect taxes, how government spends the money, and so on and so forth. And then number three is to be growth-focused. How can we grow? Imagine Nigeria being a $2 trillion economy. Even if you collect 10% of GDP as taxes, it's multiple times what we collect now. But beyond that, there are also critical areas where money will come from. Number one is tax evasion. There are people today who are doing what you're doing. They're not, maybe they're even earning more than you, and they're not paying the taxes you're paying. That is not fair, and we shouldn't allow that to continue. That will stop.
So this system will not allow that?
It will not allow that.
As long as you are captured,
you
have
pay
NIN,
taxes.
you have banking.
You have NIN, you have bank information, you have phone number. Even this phone number you are looking at.
You can't hide
excellent data. This gives me. You travel abroad, we have the data. You buy land, we have the data. You buy a car or even bicycle or motorcycle, you build a house, you know you're going to connect to electricity. We have the data. You open an investment account, pension account, stockbroking account. We want you to do your activities, but government will track those activities so that when you refuse to report your income correctly, we will find out. We want to get to a point where we will not come to you and say, Sheon, how much did you earn in 2025? No, we'll tell you how much you've earned. It is for you to either disprove or approve. So that system is important. Every country where you see development, this is how they build their society.
So are we able to digitize the process?
Yes, so that's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly what we're doing.
So
we're going to digitize everything.
So there's a new name now.
Including
from FRS to
NRS, Nigeria Revenue Service. And that Nigeria Revenue Service will then work in collaboration with subnationals. So if you live and work in Ekiti State, for example, you can't go and tell them that actually, by the way, I'm resident in the FCT when you are not resident here. That lie happens every single day in Nigeria today. We'll find out that system will tell us where you're resident. You know that if you move around, your phone can actually tell me where you were yesterday, right? So that data will help us to ensure that, one, we know who is truly poor and protect them and exempt them completely from paying taxes.
So this is a poor man protection policy.
It's a pro-poor,
okay,
pro-business, and pro-growth and equity and fairness.
So where will the extra income come from?
Yes. So one is tax evasion. So we estimate that the tax gap, which is how much we are collecting versus how much we could be collecting, is in the region of 70%. So we're only collecting 30% of what is we can collect. So we want to close that gap. Imagine you just close it by another 30%. That's double what you collect now. Number two is we have a lot of wasteful incentives that are not just wasteful, they're also distortionary. So we lose money and they create problem for the economy. So we fix that as well. So that's money coming to the government without raising the taxes on the people. And then, of course, there is the one to do with just ensuring that government resources are more efficiently utilized. So these areas combined will be the initial areas where we make money from. But ultimately, the money will come from the economy growing. If you get 10% of $200 billion, it's more than 100% of $1 billion. So that is the whole idea. That is where the money will come. It's not about going to the person who is struggling to survive and asking them to pay more. They have nothing else to give. Yeah.
I mean, interesting that the president asked for a fiscal policy and tax reforms committee. That was your committee. So it's not only tax reform. I want to know whether you did any work on fiscal policy. Did you do any work on fiscal policy?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So I've been completely.
Because that is the first leg of
the assignment.
Of the assignment by the president.
Yeah. So people just think it's okay. I think the tax bills gave us the visibility because we were not paying attention to us before. But actually, you know, the tax reform bills, in my estimation, is less than 20% of the work we're doing.
Really?
Yes. So the bulk of the work is around the fiscal side. We've done a lot of work around, we've developed what we call a Nigeria fiscal policy framework that sets out how we do things. For example, who should do tax, what revenue should you collect, how do you deal with subsidies and conditional transfers? How do you deal with inclusiveness for youth, for women, for people with disability? How do you deal with issues around the climate change? So those policies, we've documented them. There's also a lot of work we've done around how do we transform our budgetary system. In fact, there are proposals we've sent to the National Assembly to amend the Constitution to tell you the extent of the work we've done. So you are right. The assignment given to us is quite broad, and it was very intentional. Mr. President was very intentional in the terms of reference to say, look at fiscal policy and tax for me. In addition to that, one thing that the President did that we should commend, and I recommend that this should be replicated, is the first time, at least I can remember in Nigeria, that a committee was set up with a mandate not only to come with ideas and recommendations, but also a requirement for them to support in the implementation. Just imagine Orosanya report. If we had done it like this, maybe we would have implemented it at least to some extent. So when the controversy was really, really very heated, I said to myself, what if all we did was to write recommendations and say, dear federal government and government of Nigeria, we write the laws, put this provision here, and we've taken photos and we moved on. It would have been impossible to deal with those problems. So I think it's commendable that we are not only coming up with the ideas, we're also working with the government to do the implementation. It's been very effective.
So I mean, they did a bit of a research, and I look at what South Africa, for example, is generating in personal income tax.
Yes.
And compare with the South Africa is less than 80 million people.
Yeah, about 60
we are about 200 million people. South Africa gets almost 4 times what Nigeria gets in personal income tax. So it doesn't make sense, actually. We do know that if South Africa, that is about a third of our population, gets 4 or 3 times more in personal income tax than Nigeria, and they're less than us, it doesn't make sense. It shows that something is wrong with our net and how we need to capture it. And I think that President Bola Tinubu is probably blessed with a few people around him, someone like you, and someone like Zach Adedeji. A lot of people don't know that that guy is a first-class accountant.
Very smart
guy. And you look at FRS, for example, from 12 trillion to 19 trillion, from 19 trillion to 21 trillion. There's a target of 25 trillion in the next end of the next calendar year. That is the target. What do you think we could possibly get? What figure do you think matches our possibility if it's properly captured, the way this law is being framed now?
Yeah, great question. So, and I like the example of South Africa you just made. In fact, you underestimated their performance. As of 2023, South Africa made about 50 trillion naira equivalent from personal income tax alone. That's more than all our revenues from all taxes, from selling crude oil, federal, state, local government, all combined. What South Africa made in personal income tax alone was more than that. By the way, that same year that they made 50 trillion, we made 1.5. So they made 30 times what we made in personal income tax. You know where the good news is actually? South Africa is not only just about 1/3 of our population. They have an exemption threshold in South Africa today that if you earn about 600,000 naira a month, you are completely exempted from paying personal income tax. That amount goes even further up if you are a senior, like you retired. And here we are in Nigeria taxing all the poorest people, and we can't raise the money. And the answer to that question is very simple. It's because people cannot give what they don't have. In South Africa, the top 1% of their population alone pays 90% of the personal income tax. So this is what we're now trying to do in Nigeria. If you want to promote equity, fairness, and have justice in a society, you must have progressive tax system that protects the poor, collect fairly an amount from the middle class, and allow the top of society to pay a little bit more. So moving forward with these reforms, we're going to start by collecting credible data. I don't know of any country where people start paying taxes because they're excited to pay. So
it's always a reluctance.
It's a reluctant in everywhere
responsibility.
In the world. And the reason is because, you know, if you're hungry and you pay for a meal of food, a plate of meal, you get the benefit immediately. We know that taxes benefit society, but you don't see the direct benefit, so you rather not pay. So South Africa collects about 26% of their GDP in taxes. Nigeria collects, even just recently, we moved to about 13.5% of GDP If everything works out well, back to your question, Nigeria should be at a minimum of 18 to 20% of GDP. And that should translate to around 50 trillion naira in today's values. So which means, fast forward to another couple of years, that number should go up. Because we need to spend more in infrastructure, human capital development, and investing in tomorrow. We're barely struggling to pay salaries now and borrowing to do almost everything else. That's not sustainable. So this holds a lot of promise for the country, and we need to all work together to implement.
Quickly, how do you define the poor in Nigeria?
That was an
If there's a
interesting
protection.
Yeah, that was an interesting debate we had. By the way, my committee is made up of more than 100 Nigerians who are all very committed. This is one of the excitements that I have gained in the past 2 years on this job. I've always been in Nigeria, but I didn't realize that Nigerians love their country so well. But the point is, we debated this question you asked. We said, who is a poor person in Nigeria? First, we started with data like, the World Bank and the UN will tell you $2.15 a day per person means you are at the poverty line. And we said to ourselves, actually, in Nigeria, there are people who do not earn $2 a day, but they are not poor because they produce the food that they eat. They don't have to pay for transport. They just trek to the farm. I lived and grew up in the village. So we had to factor all of that in. We came up and we drew our own line for Nigeria on the basis of average of 5 people per family, 2 people working, if they're lucky, taking care of the 5. When we did the maths, it gave us an amount, and that's actually exactly what we use in determining the income below which nobody should pay any taxes.
What figure did they give you?
So we came up with, I think it was 120 or 30,000 per
household.
Month. No, per 2 people working in a household of 5.
So if the earnings is about
250,000, they can take care of themselves. Of course, they're not going to have luxury, but at least they
but
can.
But they are still classified as poor.
They are poor, and they shouldn't pay taxes.
But there are millions of those who are not even making 50,000 naira in a month.
Yes, but it means they won't pay taxes. This tax law will not give you cash in your pocket, right? But at least it won't take your cash away if you're poor. So for us, that was the starting point of draw that line of poverty. And from that point downwards, nobody earning those amounts of income should have to pay tax because they don't even have enough.
But the fear is that the middle class and the medium earners are going to be burdened. That's the fear.
No, we've also reduced. So that's one good thing we've done. So even though I don't like to divide society, but the purpose of this, we have the low-income people at the bottom, we have people at the middle, we have people at the top. We have eliminated the tax completely for people at the bottom. We have reduced for people in the middle, and we have increased slightly for people at the top. That's what we've done. So if I want to give you numbers, that middle, we estimated it in the region of about 1.82 million naira a month. If you're earning those kind of amounts and below, your tax will not be zero, but it will reduce from what you are paying today. And that's fair enough. Of course, people will argue that 2 million is not a lot of money. But in our context, it's a lot of money because people who earn 2 million per month and above in Nigeria are less than 5% of all workers.
I asked you 5 questions, and this is where I want us to anchor. It was the political and ethnic division and controversy that rose up. And I asked you, you remember those 5 questions I asked you at the town hall?
Yes.
The political questions, the religious questions, the ethnic questions about the impact of this law. Are those settled now?
I would say substantially yes, because for the key stakeholders, they now fully understand. And the reason why I'm not going to say is 100%, I know that there's still people, ordinary people, who still don't believe what we are doing. They still hold on to those conspiracies, theories, misinformation. There was a guy who just, cooked up that Tinubu would take 1 basket of produce out of every 4 that they produce from farmers. Like, how do we... They say, where did they find this in the law?
But they believe that some northern states are going to be more impacted than southern states.
It's not supported by anything in the reforms. Actually, it's the other way around. The state that would have a reduction in their VAT revenue is Lagos State, which was why we started by discussing with Lagos State. We thought that was the difficult conversation to have because others will benefit. But it was misunderstood. We thought it was our responsibility to explain. We did. And I think now substantially our stakeholders do understand.
Before I allow you go, Mr. Oyedele, what is that significant lesson that you learned in all of this period?
What I've learned, number one, is when I started this job, I thought that it was about thinking smartly, coming up with brilliant ideas was going to be the job. I quickly realized that that was going to be 10% of my work.
This is not Harvard.
And it's not Harvard, my brother. 90% of
Street
it,
Harvard.
90% of my work turned out to be stakeholder management. And in that process, the other lesson is just because I mean well for you, I should not assume that you will support me. It's my duty to explain to you. And one other thing that I've been able to do based on feedback that people give me is not getting angry, because there's no point really.
Would you take this again if you have been offered?
Yes, I'll do it again. I'll do it again.
You love Nigeria more?
I love Nigeria.
You are coming of age. You are 50 now.
Yeah, so even if anything happens to me today, they will write a story about me that there was a guy who tried to help his country. I'm very glad for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you, Taiwo, for coming.